Good evening, everyone. Please just excuse the way I sound. I'm got a bit of flu, and we'll get through the shiur, please God. I gave the shiur this morning to some of the kids that I teach at the Torah, and they said, "If why do bad things happen to good people, Rabbi? Why did you get sick?" It's quite a good question. So I said to them, "There's a Gemara that says that everything is in the hands of heaven except for colds and flus." So if you're foolish and you don't listen to your mommy who told you to put a jersey on and then you got sick, so you can't blame Hashem. But that's what I told them. So it was quite cute because they knew what the topic was, and they decided, let's see what the rabbi does with that information. Anyway, so just please excuse me as I cough and sneeze and splutter through it. But I do want to learn Torah with you all, and please God, we should all be strong and healthy. All right, so this is the perennial question of Judaism. Why do bad things happen to good people? It's a great question. A lot of people, it's a question that shakes their faith and their belief in God. But some of the greatest personalities of Judaism, for example, Abraham, asked Hashem this question when he found out that God was going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. He said to Hashem, "Hashoifet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat." A little bit of a chutzpah to say that to Hashem, the judge of the whole world won't do justice. I mean, Hashem, you are meant to be the good judge, and how can you behave in such a manner? It's a bit of a cheek to say. So Hashem doesn't say to Abraham, keep quiet, as we'll see later on, that is sometimes Hashem's answer. Hashem says, okay, let's go see if there are righteous people in Sodom. And he goes and he looks for 50, and then he comes back and he says, no, I never found 50. Then he looks for 40 and 30 and 20. Yeah, Hashem knew there weren't righteous people in the cities of Sodom, but he shows Abraham that there were no righteous, and therefore he's doing what he wants to do. But from the outset, Abraham is struggling with this question. So if you're struggling with this question, you're in very good company. Another personality, David Amelech, King David, he says, Bifrach Roshoim Kemo Esev, we say this verse in Tehillim every Shabbat, twice or three times. Bifrach Roshoim Kemo Esev V'yatzitzu Kol Poale Aven. Why is it that the wicked sprout like weeds? Everything goes so well for them. The good people are suffering and bad people are prospering. Why, Hashem? And he doesn't really give an answer to that question. Another one, if you cast your minds back or forward to the Yom Kippur service during the Chazan's repetition of Musaf, we read over there the story of the 10 martyrs and how they each suffered horrendous, traumatic deaths. And the great ones like Rabbi Akiva had his skin raked off with metal combs, and Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion was wrapped in a Torah scroll and burnt at the stake. And Chutzpi Samaturgaman had his tongue ripped out and thrown into the pigsty, and Rabbi Shmuel Cohen Gadol, the king's daughter, wanted his beautiful face, so they peeled off his face while he was alive. Horrendous. And at that point, the poet who wrote this 10 martyrs tells us that the Serafei Mala, the seraphim of the cosmic worlds, they call out to Hashem, Zu Torah v'zu Sechora. Is this the reward for learning and teaching Torah? Basically, why are bad things happening to these amazingly good people in the world? And Hashem's answer is just as questionable as the question. And Hashem says, don't say another word. That's how he answers it. Don't say another word. If you say another word, I'll destroy the whole world. So we need to understand Hashem's answer. But isn't it great that not only are we confounded by this question of why do bad things happen, the angels themselves don't know the answer to this question. And none greater personage than Moses, he has a meeting with God. You know, so many people, you ask him a question. If you could have an audience with God, what would be the one question you asked him? Do aliens exist? Were there dinosaurs? I've had a few answers like that in the past from people. But Moses has an audience with God. And you know what he says? Hareini na et kevodecha. Show me your face. What does that mean? Obviously, God doesn't have a face. So Rashi says, you know what he wanted to know? He wanted to know why the good people suffer. That was actually the question. What has that got to do with God's face? I'm not really sure. Maybe it's got to do with the Birkat Kohanim, where we say, Yisa Hashem panav elecha, may God shine his countenance upon you. So maybe that's the face of God, his favor. Why don't you show favor to the Jewish people, to the tzaddikim, the good people in this world? Why are the good people suffering? And God's answer also very cryptic. He says to Moses, Lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. No man can see me and live. While you are alive, there is no answer to this question. You have to pass away. And only when you meet God face to face will you know the answer to this question. Well, Moses wasn't happy with that answer, so he wrote a book. It's a lesser known book. They're the famous 5 books of Moses. You all know Genesis, Exodus, you all know Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Those are the 5 books of Moses. But there's a lesser known book that he wrote, which also makes it in the canon of the Bible, and that is the book of Job. In Hebrew, it's called Eov. And Moses wrote that book. And there are some rabbis who say that it's just a story, it's just a fairy tale, and never really happened. But the others who say no, on the contrary, Job, was one of the advisors of Pharaoh. And when Pharaoh was looking for a final solution to the Jewish problem, he approached his 3 wise men, and he said, one of them was Jethro, who later became the father-in-law of Moses. Jethro said, don't do anything to them, and he got exiled, and he landed up in Ethiopia, where he had some daughters, and Moses eventually marries one of them. The other advisor was Balaam, who later on comes to curse the Jewish people, and Balaam was quite genocidal when he said, wipe them all out, kill all the Jews. We've heard that one before as well. And then there was a third advisor, and he was Job, Eov. And Job said nothing. He sat on the fence. And his punishment was, as Moses describes it in the book of Job, Job was a wonderful man. He was a tzaddik. He wasn't a Jew, but makes sure to tell us that he's not Jewish. But he's fearful of God. He has 7 sons and 7 daughters, which basically in Bible, whenever it says 7, it means many. Many sons and many daughters. He had beautiful home. He had a beautiful fields, a business, cows and sheep and whatever. He had it all, and life was good. And the book takes us behind the scenes where Satan makes a wager with God, a bet with God, and says, you know, God, the only reason Job is always praying and is always blessing you is because you are so good to him. You give him so much good things. That's why he's good to you. But I wager you, God, if you were to take those things away from him, I'm sure he wouldn't praise you anymore. So you know what God says to Satan? He says, you're on. I bet you're wrong. And so Satan goes, and he's got full permission to do whatever he likes to Job. He's just not allowed to kill Job. And he starts with the kids, all the kids, 7 or 14 of them, whatever number you have there, were in a party and having a party. And Job was bringing sacrifices for his children while they were at a party. The roof falls in and kills all his children. The next day, the fields all burn up in fire. All the animals die of pestilence. His house falls down. And Job is this very good man, and all these bad, terrible things are happening to him. And then to add insult to injury, he's lying on the floor, and his body breaks out in terrible pustules and boils, and he's reeking so badly, he stinks. Even his friends can't come near him because his body smells so malodorously. And he's lying on the floor in this quagmire of destruction. His whole life, in a blink of an eye, has been taken from him. And this is the question. And Moses is writing the story. Why do bad things happen to good people? So his wife deals with it quite well. His wife says, very simply, just a few words, curse God and die. And that's some of us. That's unfortunately some of our responses as well. When the bad things happen and you're a good person and you've done good your whole life and you've never warranted this terrible thing happening, the one option is, like Job's wife says, is just to curse God and die. I mean, how many survivors of the Holocaust threw their tefillin into the sea and said, how can there be Hashem? How could a God, a good God, let this terrible thing happen to me and my family? And he threw his tefillin in the sea. It's very similar to the response of the wife of Job. Of course, we can't judge them. We feel for them, and we understand that we don't know what we would do in that same situation. But that's not the solution. Then the next 35 chapters in the most difficult poetic Hebrew. Job is visited by three of his friends. One of his friends is famous. His name is Eliphaz. Eliphaz is famous because he's the son of Esau. He's the nephew of Jacob. He was commanded by Esau after Jacob stole the blessing from Esau. Esau, his father, said, Eliphaz, go kill your uncle because he stole the blessings from me. Meanwhile, Jacob was running away and he was going to look for himself for a wife. And he goes to his father-in-law, his future father-in-law's house, Laban, and he marries Rachel and Leah. But on the way, he gets accosted by Eliphaz, his nephew, and Eliphaz says, look, I don't know what to do. And Jacob had taught him Torah. He said, I don't know what to do. My father's asked me to kill you. What do I do? So Jacob says to him, take away all my money. Take away all my belongings. Let me go empty-handed to Laban's house. And he does that, and he says, the Gemara tells us that someone who's poor is like he's dead. So there, you've achieved what your father wanted. By stripping me of all my things, it's like I'm dead. And Eliphaz was a tzaddik. And later on, he comes to Job with another two friends. And for 35 or so chapters, they're berating Job and explaining to him all the sins that he's done in his life. And Job responds and retorts in a similar, very poetic, difficult Hebrew why he's innocent of all the sins that they're outlining. And it's going backwards and forwards, but God hates the response of the friends. And God berates them and punishes them because you never blame the victim. You never blame the victim. And so often we do that. We see something terrible happens to a good person. The first thing we say is, yeah, but were they so good? You know, I've heard stories. I could tell you stories about that person. I don't know if they were so good. You know, you're asking why Hashem did this. I don't know if they were such amazing people. There was a rabbi that said you should look at your own life with a microscope. If something happens to you, you should look at it with a microscope with great analysis and try and work out why Hashem, what message Hashem is sending you. But when it comes to other people's lives, you should look at them with a telescope, far away from a very, very far distance. Don't judge people. The problem is we look at everybody else with a microscope and we look at ourselves with a telescope. We love blaming the victim. A girl was accosted at a club. We say, oh, well, she shouldn't have been wearing what she was wearing. You see, it's her fault. That Hashem hates that. Hashem hates that. We hate that. Why did the Holocaust happen? Well, you get some rabbis who say because the Jews had an option to go to Israel and they turned it down. So Hashem punished them in Europe. And then you got another group of rabbis who say, no, it's because they wanted to take Israel by force. And if you take Israel by force, like in the time of Haman woke up. It's like pulling the chain of the dog. And Amalek is the dog. Don't go to Israel unless you're invited. And they're all fighting. But the worst thing about all those answers is they're all about blame the victim. And we know Hashem's response to Eliphaz and his two cronies. Hashem doesn't like that at all. Finally, a fourth friend towards the end of the book. A fourth friend comes in. And this is my second favorite answer to this perennial question of why do bad things happen to good people. A fourth friend comes. His name is Elihu. And Elihu has been standing on the sidelines. He hasn't opened his mouth and he explains it's because he's young and he doesn't think that it's his place, and he has respect for his elders who are talking and talking and talking. And in the end, he says, and he reveals to Job the secret of reincarnation. And we've had many shiurim on it. But basically, the concept is that you might not necessarily be fixing up something that you've done wrong in this life, but maybe in a previous incarnation, maybe in a previous life, you did something that needs its rectification in this world. And perhaps the Job in the story is a reincarnation of the Job in the story of Pharaoh. Maybe it's not, maybe he didn't live that long. Maybe he died and he was reincarnated to suffer because he sat on the fence, because he never said to Pharaoh, leave the Jewish people alone. He said, I'm abstaining from the vote. And maybe that's the reason he was being punished for something from a prior life. I must just tell you in my own life, there's this one guy that I can't get away from. I've literally moved 2,000 kilometers away from Joburg. There's somebody in my life who's ruined my life. I know I sound like a victim, but I'm really not. I know that it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's Hashem who runs the world. And I can't get away from him wherever I go. I came all the way to Muizenberg, and he's still in my life, still trying to ruin everything. So I came to the answer, the conclusion. Obviously, in a previous life, I was a bully to his soul and my soul. And now I'm getting what's my comeuppance. I'm getting my payback for something I did, because I've never done anything to him in this world, in this life that I'm aware of. No, I am aware of it. I haven't done anything. I've analyzed my life with a microscope, and this guy has it in for me. It's amazing. He's followed me through time and space, and he's still there. And I think it's all Hashem just helping me rectify a previous life. Must be. It's the only answer I can think of. It's the only answer I can think of. Anyway, I love this answer, and I'll tell you why I love this answer. But it's my second favorite answer. The reason it's my second favorite answer is because when you hear the real answer, I think you'll agree with me. Some people don't, but that's totally up to you. Some people like the blame the victim answer. You know why that happened to you? Well, it's your fault. In fact, we do say that. I gave this on Friday night at my sermon, but only two of you that are here were at shul, or three of you. There's a Rambam that says, when earthquakes happen, etc., why did an earthquake happen? You have a guy, he lives in Los Angeles on the San Andreas Fault, and he's a good man, and he gives charity, and he learns Torah, and his children are all beautiful and amazing. He's got a happy marriage, and he's doing everything right. And then an earthquake hits, and his house gets swallowed up by the ground, like Korach. But what did he do wrong? Korach was a sinner. But what did this good guy do wrong? He's just lost his house in LA. He didn't do anything wrong. He just chose a bad place to live. And the Rambam, you see, I'm quoting the Rambam. The Rambam wrote a book which also isn't so popular because it's based on Aristotelian logic. And today we know that Aristotle was wrong in a lot of his scientific explorations. And Aristotle, we now know that Newton and Einstein taught us that Aristotle was wrong. But the Rambam bases a lot on Aristotle, and his book, The Guide to the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, is based a lot on Aristotelian logic, and that's why people don't really learn it. But there are some gems in that book. And one such gem is the following. There are many rabbis who say that man is the apex of creation. Starts at the bottom with inanimate objects, and then you have your trees and your plants and your flowers, and then you have animal life, and then on the top, the apex of all of creation, the reason that Hashem created the world was for man. Well, that's some rabbis. The Rambam is of the opinion that no, the planet wasn't created for man. God created the planet because he wanted to create the planet. And because of that, there are places, he actually brings us, that man should not inhabit. There are places that you should not live because of it's a desert or an earthquake or a tornado or whatever. So again, it's the same as me having a cold today. I can't say, oh, Hashem, what are you trying to teach me? What did I do wrong? Microscope my life, analyze my life. I didn't wear a jersey. My mom always tells me, wear a jersey. I didn't wear a jersey when it was cold. And now my wife also tells me, wear a jersey. I never listened, so I got cold, I got sick. I'm not blaming Hashem. So if you live on the San Andreas fault, every so often the tectonic plates of the planet will move and your house will be swallowed up. And you can't say, oh, Hashem, I was so good. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. You just chose a bad place to live because the planet wasn't made for man. There are many uninhabitable places. And you shouldn't live there because that's going to happen. Okay. But I love Eliyahu's answer, the reincarnation answer, going back to that, because it answers a lot of questions. It answers how a Jew deals with infant mortality. It deals with how Hashem could allow 1.5 million children to be murdered in the Holocaust. How did a baby get so sick? What has a baby done wrong? Why is Hashem not just? And you go to these terrible wards in the hospital and you see them suffering. And it's a good question. But if you look at the answer of Elihu, and please don't tell this to people that are suffering, and you'll see why in my favorite. That's why this is my second favorite answer, because this isn't something you tell people. This is for academic purposes, just to learn. And I'm sharing with you the stuff that I've learned from a book written by Moses. But it's really not meant to try and make people feel better that are suffering. Just respect what people are going through, and you'll hear in my final answer with that one. Nevertheless, Judaism can answer that. There isn't such a thing as children. You see, everybody's soul is a neshama. Our neshamas are thousands of years old. There are only 600,000 neshamas. And how many people have lived on this planet? Billions. There are 8 billion now. But what about last generation? How many billions were there? 5 billion. Sorry, it's my bar mitzvah. 5 billion, and the 3 generations ago, 2 billion. Add it all together. How many people have lived on the planet? Billions upon billions of people have lived, but there are only 600,000 souls. So our souls are ancient souls. I gave shiurim on this about reincarnation and how it all works according to the Arizal and Rabbi Chaim Vital, not according to Goldstein. I don't know anything, but I can tell you what those books say. And I'm not going to rehash it now, but when you see a baby, it's not a baby, it's a very old soul. And a suffering baby is a very, very old and elevated soul that has lived many lives and has finally reached the peak, the end of its total rectification. The soul is almost ready. It just needs to come to earth for another year, month, or chas v'sholem, even a few days. Why? And why are the poor parents suffering? We don't know. And that's why we say when a person passes away, we say God is the Dayana Emet, the true judge, because he knows exactly what he's doing. We don't understand it. We suffer, we mourn, we grieve. But Hashem knows that that soul is getting its rectification. And that soul only needs a week or a day or a month or a year to live on this planet. But it's a very old and lofty soul. To the point where when the Chazon Ish, a great rabbi who lived in Bnei Brak, he died in the 1950s, when he would meet people who were mentally handicapped, he would stand up for them. And you know, in Judaism, when you stand for someone, it's a sign of respect. I guess not only in Judaism, but the Torah does tell you to stand. Ifnei seva takum v'hadarta pnei zakein. You stand up in respect. It's a sign of respect. The Chazon Ish, when he would meet someone who was severely mentally handicapped, he would stand up for them as they were wheeled in their wheelchairs to him to get a brocha, to get a blessing. He would stand up in their presence. And people would challenge him and say, Rabbi, you are the greatest rabbi alive. Why are you standing for them? And he would explain that they are very lofty souls. Their souls are right at the end of their rectification, much greater than his own soul. And he saw that, and he respected that. And I love this answer. It's the answer of reincarnation. It doesn't sit well with a lot of people. I do appreciate that as well. And it's not my favorite answer. My favorite answer we'll get to soon. But at the end of the book of Job, Hashem appears to Job. And Hashem says to him just a few words, which are so powerful. And it's really what's the answer, I guess, to this whole question. I don't love Hashem's answer either, but it is an answer. It works. And Hashem says to him the following words, Eifa hayita beyasti eretz. Where were you when I planted the foundations of the planet? Where were you, Job? You weren't around. What Hashem is saying is you can't see the whole picture. You are looking at a tiny moment in time, and you're trying to work out my mind and my plan. Where were you when I started it? And I think this is the same answer that God is giving to those angels on the Yom Kippur service, where the angels say to God, why are you killing these great rabbis? And God says, if you utter another word, I will turn the world to tohu vavohu, to chaos. I will destroy the world. I don't think Hashem is acting like an irritable parent or teacher. You say to the teacher, why did you give me a B and not an A on my exam? And the teacher says, if you say another word, I will burn the school down. That's not the right answer. Why does Hashem give that answer? And I think the explanation is as follows. Hashem is saying to the angels, you haven't even been around. You've only been around a couple billion years. How are you meant to understand my mind and my plan? If you want to understand, I'll need to destroy the world and start it again so you can watch exactly what I'm doing. And when you watch the process, you will understand the answer to this question. But Job, you're only a little man on planet Earth. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the planet? It's like someone who's looking through a keyhole and he sees a white sleeve. And just as the white sleeves moves away, he sees a little baby. And the baby's being stabbed and the baby's crying. And he pulls the door open. And it's a doctor. And the doctor's not stabbing the baby, he's giving the baby an injection. And the mother's holding the baby and the baby's crying. But they're giving him an injection so that he'll be good, he'll be healthy, he'll be strong. But you watched that through the keyhole and all you saw was a little baby crying and you thought, oh no, what a terrible thing is happening. You've got to open the door, you've got to look at the whole picture, says Hashem to Job. You can't just look at a little speck of time and space. You've got to look at everything. But you can't because you're not me. And that's what God is saying to Moses. Man cannot see my face and live. But don't worry, Moses. When you're dead, I will show it all to you. You can't appreciate the answer to this question while you are alive. But when you pass away, Hashem will reveal all. You'll have the ultimate audience with Hashem, and all your questions will be answered. And that, truthfully, is a great segue into the final answer, which I love. And it's the answer that keeps me going. And I heard this from Rabbi Y. Jacobson. And I must tell you, when I said this to the kids today, they said to me, Rabbi Y. Jacobson, he's the brother-in-law of our principal, Rabbi Avi Shlomo. I was like, rubbish, don't talk rubbish. They said, we promise you, Rabbi. I said, I don't believe you, talking rubbish. Apparently, Rabbi Y, who's for sure the cleverest and funniest rabbi I've ever heard, is the brother-in-law of Rabbi Shlomo, who is one of the rabbis in West Coast Chabad. And he's my boss at Cape Town Torah. So if you want a good intro, that's there. I can arrange it for you. I know people. Anyway, Rabbi Wawa says the following. When you know the answer why, your care and your concern and your compassion goes out of the window. There's some things that we should never know the answer why to. Because once you know the reason, you don't care anymore. While you don't know the reason, you care. Let me give you an analogy how I understand what he was saying. You hear of a tragic story, a 40-year-old man, happily married with 6 kids, has a terrible car accident. So and you know the person, and you know the family, and you know the widow, and you know the orphans, and your heart is bleeding for them. And you feel like you can't do enough for them. You're bringing food, but you feel the food's not enough. You help with lift schemes, but even that doesn't feel enough. You want to hold them. You want to love them. You want to give them their father back, but you know you can't. You want to do everything for this family. And your heart bleeds, as I said. and you're full of compassion and love and caring, and then someone taps you on the shoulder and says, do you know why he died? He was a mafia oak. You know, he was running away. He was like shooting out of the back window. He didn't see where he was driving. He bumped into a tree. That's why he died. And then you go, ah, really? Ah, he deserved it. The second you know why, your compassion, your mercy, your care, your love, all dissipates, all disappears. So sometimes we're not meant to know why because Hashem wants us to be stuck with the question. Hashem wants us to care. Hashem doesn't want us to get rid of our pain. We ask why because we're trying to get rid of the pain. Hashem doesn't want us to get rid of the pain. Hashem says, stop looking for answers. Turn your question into love. Turn your questions into support. Turn your questions and channel them into fighting for unfairness. When you see innocent people suffering, help them. Alleviate the suffering wherever you can. But when you look for explanations, you're looking for closure, you're looking for a way to feel better about it. And that's why there will never be an answer to this question. That's my favorite answer. And that's my favorite answer for the Holocaust as well. Don't blame the victim. Don't point fingers. Understand that Hashem runs this world in mysterious ways. But I think it's also important to unpack the title of the shiur. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why? I've already explained why. Do bad things. Let's unpack the words bad things. What's a bad thing? Getting fired? Getting divorced? Terrible, terrible. Oh, those are terrible things. Not really. Some of the biggest billionaires will tell you the best day of their life was when they got fired from their job, from their 9-to-5 job. And only when they were fired, they became great entrepreneurs. Some people who are married and in a difficult marriage, divorce, terrible. But some people will tell you when they look back, divorce was the best thing to ever happen to them. So what is bad things? When you put it out there on the poster, why do bad things? Hold on, stop. How do you quantify a bad thing? You haven't seen the whole picture to know that that thing isn't necessarily a bad thing. I've watched the documentary on the 10 winners of the lottery over the last 10 years. You can get the documentary on YouTube. I think 90% of those people who won the lottery ruined their life. They would have been much better off had they never won the lottery. And we look at that and we say, I'll win the lottery. I'll make sure it's good for me. Really? You really think so? Majority of people who win the lottery, it destroys their lives. It destroys their marriages, destroys their children. They don't know who their friends are. People are wanting to sue them all the time. They can't go out. They can't enjoy life like they used to. So what is bad things? In Hebrew, it says tzaddik v'ra. Tzaddik v'ra. A tzaddik and bad things happen to him. But listen how careful the Hebrew is. It doesn't say tzaddik v'ra li. The tzaddik never says it's bad for me. It's us looking with our telescopes. And we're saying, why is bad things happening to that guy? But if you ask the tzaddik, if you ask the righteous, the good person, he will say to you, no, nothing bad's happening to me. I understand why I need to go through what I'm going through. A truly righteous person will be able to tell you why he's going through what he's going through, what rectification he needs in his life. And that brings me to the last part of the poster. Why do bad things happen to good people? Sorry, what's a good person? Can you quantify what a good person is? Are there truly good people, or do we all have a little stain, a little bit where we need to work? In fact, when a person is perfect, they don't have to live on earth anymore. That's why those good people die, because they are truly good people. They don't need to be on this planet. But while you're still on the planet, you can't say you're a good person. There's still what you have to rectify. There's still what you have to do. So in fact, you can tear up that poster. Because why? We don't ask that why question. It takes away your compassion and your affection. Do bad things, you don't even know what bad things are. You're just assuming. Happen to good people. They aren't really good people. Everyone has something they need to fix up in their life. But our job is look at them with a telescope. Don't judge. Don't look at their lives with a microscope. Don't try and work out why these things are happening to them. It's none of your business. If you want to use the microscope, which you should, use it on yourself. Say to yourself, the rabbi said, I'm not a good person. How dare he? Wait, let me think. Am I a good person? Am I not? What is the definition of good? What's the definition of bad? Can I truly say that I'm a good person? There are no saints in Judaism. We don't have Saint Moshe and Saint David and Saint Abraham. There are no saints. All the great people sinned one way or another, and they worked in their lives to make it better and to fix it up and become better. And finally, I'll end off. There's a story by a woman called Alison. She actually came and spoke to a group of kids that we were at Orsamayach years ago when I was involved there. She has a horrendous, terrible, terrible story. You can Google her, Alison. Apparently, she spoke here in Cape Town a few days ago. And she wrote a story about her life, how she was kidnapped and terrible things happened to her that night. Terrible, I don't even want to say the words, but the Satanists who got her, they cut her open and her insides were falling out, and she was literally carrying her insides to the highway to try and get a lift for someone to take her to hospital. It's a horrendous story. It's Alison, I think it's called My Life or whatever, I don't remember. And she's done amazing work talking to people about her tragic story and how she survived it. There's a butterfly on the page. She's got a whole thing about the butterfly and how it gave her hope. Alison. Anyway, so there was a Q&A afterwards. And she's a good person, and a terrible thing happened to her that night. Terrible. And you ask that question, why do bad things happen to good people? Do you know there was a Q&A afterwards, and people could ask her questions. And I was dying to ask her this question, but I never had to, thank God. Someone else did. Listen what they said to her. They said, Alison, if you had your life over again, would you still want this thing to have happened to you? And it's horrendous. I can't even describe how terrible what she went through. You know what she said? She said yes. She said yes. Now, I can't say that. Only someone who suffered like she did. She said, because the good that has come out of that bad thing that happened to her has changed lives, has changed the world, has made other people's lives better because she went through what she went through and she wasn't scared to talk about it and publish it and make a movie, a documentary, and write a book about it. And that's the vote. So why do bad things happen to good people? You're not meant to know the answer. And if you're looking for an answer, then you've got to say, can you blame the person? Do you blame the victim? Are you living somewhere where you shouldn't be living? But if another person is involved, if the bad thing happened, Hashem's not going to get in the way of free choice. Hashem will never take away another person's free choice in order to save another person. And that's why in the story of Joseph, the two older brothers, Simon and Levi, wanted to kill Joseph. And Reuven said, don't kill the boy. Don't kill the boy. Throw him in a pit with snakes and scorpions. Great, shkayach. Great solution. You are the brother of the year. How does that work? Don't kill him. Throw him in a pit with snakes and scorpions. You know why Reuven did that? He took away the human element. Because we say every day in Tachanun, Niflana biyad Hashem. Let me fall to the hands of God, ki rabu rachamav, because his mercy is great. And don't let me fall in the hands of man, because man has free choice. Reuven extricated Joseph from the brothers who wanted to kill him because God would not protect Joseph when there's another human being's free choice at stake. And that's a whole shiur why we need free choice and why God needs this world to have free choice. But just accept that as a given for this point, that God can't take away free choice from humankind, because then we're not humans anymore, and then there's no point for creation. But Reuven understood this. He said, let me take away that human component. So when someone hurts someone else, it can happen. A bad person can kill and hurt a good person. But as I said in the beginning, Hashem is the Dayan HaEmet, is the true judge. And Hashem will meter out exactly the reward and the punishment to those souls, because death isn't the end, death isn't final. Hashem will still give the reward and the punishment where it is due. But what Reuven was doing, he was taking out the human element from the equation, and he threw his brother into a pit with snakes and scorpions, knowing that if he's righteous, nothing will happen to him, and Tucker, nothing happened to him. And Reuven came back afterwards to take his brother out of the pit. And lo and behold, his fourth brother, Yehuda, had sold him into slavery. And you know the rest of the story. But his intentions were pure. He knew that nothing would happen to his brother in the pit, even though it was full of snakes and scorpions. So I hope I didn't confuse you. I hope it gave a little bit of clarity. But I love the fact that the biggest question was dealt with by Moses. He wrote a book about it. Try read it. At least read the first few 2-3 chapters, and then read the last few chapters. You can skip all the middle ones because the Hebrew and the English is really, really difficult. But do yourself a favor. This is the oldest question. Moses, who could speak to God on a daily basis, he asked this question, asked and answered. Laila Tov. Thanks for joining.